What's up, guys? This is Jimmy with High Fly Fitness, and today I have Joe Stanek on the call, and we'll be talking and discussing about how to properly train, program for the novice client, the responsibilities of a coach, and what is expected of them when they're teaching beginners how to lift, how to train, and what should be expected between the client and the coach themselves to start off. So, Joe, in your opinion, as a novice athlete, they seem to be very vulnerable to what information that they absorb and what they've learned and what they think is the right way to start training and what's the most effective way to start training. But before we get into any of that, what do you think the most important thing for the novice athlete or the novice client really to start training? What do you think the first thing that needs to be established before the novice trainee starts out with even a structured template?
So first of all, Jim, thanks for having me, for doing this. Hopefully this keeps going back and forth. I think I'm going to be enjoying this discussion a lot. Anyway, as far as novices, I think definitely as a novice, you need to be, or you are very impressionable as a lifter, and as such, I think that's the best time to really work on safety with form. I mean, after all, if you start to develop bad habits as far as doing those big, heavy compound movements, you're going to be prone to injury so much more as compared to if you continue to train properly and establish good form and all that kind of thing. So when I take on a novice as a client, first thing I do, of course, is to break down their form and make sure that it's all correct. And I think you do something similar.
Yeah, I think first of all, I don't if somebody can't work with me in an online setting because I am an online coach, if they can't provide me with videos of their form, properly at least, and they can't send them to me at least weekly or every other week or something, depending on their skill level, it would be more appropriate for them to maybe see a personal trainer or a strength coach within the area because I don't want to just give somebody a program and say this is what you should be doing without understanding what their form looks like because that's like you said before, it's really easy for them to ingrain improper habits as a novice trainee and ingrain and then if they don't have a proper coach to teach them the right way, as you said, it leads to injury much quicker than if they just start out right away getting their form on point. And that being said, um, learning proper form takes time, but there's a few fundamentals that just need to be associated or figured out. So what I like to do right away is to check out just their body weight squat. And one of the reasons is because even a barbell squat, but a body weight squat works too because if they don't have an equipment right away, you can just look at their body weight squat and look at their mobility issues, at their hips especially, and at their ankles, and see if they have any lower body mobility issues. And then if you really want to get a good analysis of how their form or mobility is overall, put them under a barbell and have them squat, and that will show some upper body mobility issues, especially in their shoulders and their thoracic spine. You can't always tell the thoracic spine issues from just a body weight squat since there's no load. So that really is what I like to establish is look at their body weight squat and then figure out what is needed mobility wise to fix their form for the long run and allow them to progress in a safe manner.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you mentioned mobility because as far as especially if somebody who hasn't been training long or even just wants to get into training in the first place, I think that is the most mis not misguided, or underappreciated part of being a novice is the ability to develop the mobility to go through the lifts in the first place. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that novices make, and people who coach novices as well, is they don't allow them a little time to develop the necessary mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, that just starts to take a toll on your body after a while because you don't have the mobility to do this. You're using improper motor patterns. You're activating the wrong muscles, and eventually, bad things can happen. You could, do something to your shoulder or tweak your low back or something like that. And obviously that's something you want to prevent because after all, lifting is even though it's a fast sport, it's a marathon overall. As a career lifter, you have to think about it in terms of your lifetime goals, not just what can I do tomorrow.
Right. And another thing when on mobility work, what is it? There's a it's a spectrum just like anything. You could be doing super isolated mobility patterns just to maybe target a specific joint. But that's not always what is required for the athlete. So it doesn't necessarily mean doing if any of you guys are aware of Kelly Starrett, he's got a lot of awesome mobility drills, but that doesn't always mean just doing isolated drills to target a specific point. Sometimes it just means doing variations of barbell lifts to work on the mobility. Like especially for the squat, there's a few things that you can do via different progressions. Maybe a goblet squat or a pause squat with weights, just to learn how to get depth. Because sometimes you can't actually get depth without weight on the bar, especially if your mobility isn't even there. But that can kind of force proper mobility without too much injury if you're doing it in the correct way. And I don't really want to get into too many specifics of how to get proper mobility, but there's a bunch of different ways. So sometimes people get, kind of butthurt about, doing specific stretches or something where sometimes it's required and sometimes it's not. And a needs analysis is required for both the programming nutrition, but then also the mobility work, which is really needed because it really can take a psychological toll on you if half of your workout is spent doing mobility. And that's something I'm trying to work on with some of my clients that, sometimes they don't have the greatest mobility. And it's trying to get a balance of doing the right amount of strength work and then the right amount of mobility work.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting overall. It's kind of funny. We create, at least in our society, it seems that we create the bad mobility that we have. I mean, if you look at, I was just on Facebook the other day and I saw this picture that my friend posted of, I think it was some kid in a little Han Solo costume, and he was squatting next to a dog that was dressed as Chewbacca. But I took it, I was just like, wow, that kid is squatting ATG, holy crap. And I mean, it's kind of funny when you think about it that way, but that kid had the mobility as, I don't know, he might have been like 3 or 5 years old. He had the mobility to do that, and then life kind of took its toll, and we sit all day, we have jobs that keep us in our seats, we're students, we're hunched over. All those bad habits are created. So unfortunately, when that sort of thing happens, when life happens, we have to do our best to kind of reverse it, and that's something that we have to do as coaches. We have to create that almost childlike sense of mobility.
Right. And I think it just comes down to figuring out what works best for the client because like I said before, there's so many different things you can do to improve your mobility. I like to start from the ground up though, well, sometimes I like to start. It depends, Sometimes I like to start from the ground up. Just check out, like, okay, do they have a pelvic tilt? Are they bending forward? Do they have poor patterns in their workplace environment? And then I look at, what can we do as just drills to do that will almost immediately improve mobility. I like to give them drills right away, but there's a bunch of ways to go about it. And you're right, it's just all about kind of not just what you're doing in the gym, but also what you're doing in the rest of your life. And that kind of leads into, okay, once the mobility is on point, once you figure out if their form is okay, and now they're able to progress without getting injured, for the novice client or the novice athlete, what do you think is kind of what kind of methodology of training do you prefer? Kind of almost regardless of their goals, not that you want to make sure you're focusing on the goals right, but what maybe is like, would you say your preferred methodology for training a novice or programming for a novice?
So I think the best way to describe my approach is the classic keep it simple, stupid. Um, so as far as training a novice, they need to be using the basic heavy compound lifts, squat, bench, deadlift, maybe a little bit of overhead pressing in there, some rowing, things like that, but nothing too complicated. Um, I think you'll agree with me here. The biggest thing that I see in novices all the time is they just a little too eager, and I mean that's great. Being eager to progress is great, and obviously you're going to need that throughout your training career. But uh, they all just like they see all these super complicated workouts, like or they read something in Muscle and Fitness or whatever, and they're just like, oh, I want to do this kind of program, and I have to almost convince them like, no, you don't need all this complex stuff. You need to work on building the basics right now. Build your base of strength, build your base of muscle, whatever. You just you don't need any of that excessive special programming or special lifts or anything like that. So typically that's how I approach it, and I put them on a program that reflects those values. How about you?
Yeah, well, so you mentioned a good thing about, it's people see all the complicated exercises and they see that because it's associated with people that are already developed and they're already strong. Um, but one of the important reasons why it's nice to keep it simple is because I like to keep the philosophy of minimalistic training, and that doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing what's required to get the result that you want. And it's really difficult to make progress if you have a various amount of sets and reps on each exercise, depending on the day. Like it's all kind of bundled up. So you throw in some stuff here, you throw in some stuff there. Whereas it's more simple to start with what's required. Say they need some back work because they need to make sure their back is and their shoulder girdle stable. They need to learn how to squat because their goal is to become more powerful football player or the more powerful basketball player, powerlifter, what have you. The required things need to be established so that the variances, say a variation of a bench press or a variation of a squat, bench, deadlift, row, whatever exercise, the variation of that won't be effective until the compound movement is learned properly. And that can mean that they're training just those movements for a few weeks, a few months, and then add some variation. Just slight variation can help a lot, and especially if if they're not sure what their preferred form is, maybe they really would prefer a high bar squat for their preferred squat because maybe that helps them biomechanically, and we can throw that in once maybe they start with a low bar squat or just I kind of like to have them do what they want right away. Do how they prefer to lift, but I give them the exercise to do so, and then the variances can be determined after they're already efficient with the most basic exercises.
That's very true. I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, there definitely is in exercise. There's a law of individual differences. I mean, every single person has different limb lengths and different power output right off the start, different backgrounds. All those different kinds of factors come into play when you're a novice. So I definitely don't try to. I don't necessarily try to force them to do things a certain way. I attempt to optimize my clients' ability to lift to the best of their ability without harming themselves, as we've just been over. So if somebody, wants to put the bar a little lower on their shoulders and do more of a low bar squat to start, I'm not going to say no because that you have to squat high bar as soon as you start. There's no necessary. That's not necessary. It just doesn't make sense to try and force someone to do something that's uncomfortable, especially when it's still new to them when they're starting out.
Right.
And that's like the same thing as saying, you have to learn the conventional deadlift right off the start. Why not start with sumo if that feels good to you?
Right.
Um,
Exactly. There seems to be a lot of stigma, and people, especially in coaches, they have like, okay, well, this is what works for me, so this is what's going to work for you, or this works for some other person that has success, so this is what you have to do. And so it's really important for the coach to remove the subjective measure of preference and keep it objective, and keep it for the individual, keep it everything. It's for the client, not for previous experiences, and use those experiences to learn for what might be better for your client. But you have to be okay with maybe allowing your client or athlete to change whatever, kind of change up the movement pattern to make it work for them. So, after you establish the exercises, what do you think is a proper, or how do you like to allow the athlete or the client to progress in an appropriate manner when they're still in their novice stages?
so okay, obviously we know that training age is defined. At least most recently, it's been defined as the ability to recover from an overload event. So usually, as a novice, you're able to come in on Monday and I don't know, you squat 225 for a set of whatever, and then you come in Wednesday. By the time Wednesday rolls around, you're recovered and fully able to squat, more weight. So say 230. So typically, you see most programs like Starting Strength or Strongless 5x5, all those really popular novice programs that are out there. You see them usually progress in 5 to 10 pound increments, that kind of thing. What I do is a little bit different. I give my clients uh, a sort of double simultaneous progression, if that makes sense. So I say, okay, here's a rep range. If you for whatever amount of sets that I've assigned, if you hit this many reps, you can add this amount of weight next workout. And I think that allows for almost auto regulation without auto regulation, if that makes sense. So even if somebody's not feeling great that day, they can still continue to make linear progress and make the most out of their noob stage.
Right. And
But you,
I like that, and I think we got to give some credit to. Well, I don't know if he's the first guy, but he's definitely the guy that I've learned about this from is Izzy from Powerlifting to Win.
go Izzy.
His novice program with this powerlifting program has that similar auto-regulated, but without the auto-regulation for progress. And sometimes, especially if clients or previously have been athletes, their progression might be super quick because they already know the movement pattern. They've already squatted before. Maybe they've been out of the gym for a long time, so they're kind of back in their novice noob stages. But they're an athletic individual, so they kind of learn things much quicker than others. And this allows for much quicker progression for those individuals. And I don't even think, we have to restrict it to 5 to 10 pounds, but usually just keep it safe. Like I do like 5 or 2.5 to like 15 pounds usually, but
Yeah,
if
something like
for
that.
the rare case that they can jump up 20 pounds every workout on the squat or the deadlifts or something, which is rare, but it probably could happen for a few people, especially if they've been in the gym for a little bit, but they've been very athletic and they just got back in the gym.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, I'm not going to say no if you're feeling fantastic and you're just like, can I add 25? Yeah,
Yeah,
go for it, man.
yeah,
No big deal.
exactly. And it's like there's no reason to hold back as long as of the fundamentals that we talked about before. The form is on point. There's nothing drastic that's changing with their form that's allowing them to lift, and it's allowing them to progress in a safe manner. And I think that's the most important part about lifting in general is that there's no point in progressing if you're putting yourself at risk for injury. And lifting itself is going to put you at risk for injury, so we have to accept that fact. But there's ways that we can minimize the additional risk for injury by making sure that you're lifting in a proper way for your individual biomechanics, and then lifting properly in progressing properly so that your CNS can handle it, and then also your muscles and your tendons, your joints, and your bones. And I think that's probably one of the most important things about any novice program. And sometimes with some of the things that things like strong list 5x5 gets wrong, is that the list it restricts the progression to 5 pounds no matter what, starting with the bar. It's silly when people can easily progress quicker. Okay, so that's going to kind of conclude the first part of this roundtable discussion about novice clients. Um, the Check out the second part on Joe Stanik's channel, Novo Training. Um,
That's it.
it'll be up probably around the same time this is, so just check out his channel. The link will be below. And I hope you guys all enjoyed this. Hope you learned something from it, and I encourage you all to rise from within.